Hello friends, for today's video I wanted to do the end of the year book tag. I'm sure many of you are aware that the end of the year book tag isn't necessarily meant to be done at the very end of the year, but rather leading into the end of the year to kind of give an overview of where you're at, what books you still need to get around to, what books you started and haven't completed yet. Jumping straight into it, starting off with question number 1, is there a book that you have started this year that you still need to finish? I tend to refer to this as accidental DNFs, and I'll answer this specific question in just a moment because I do have a book that I started and haven't completed yet, and at this point I probably just need to go back and restart it. But there's a book that I have done this to so many times, and that would be Priory of the Orange Tree. I haven't done it yet this year. I've actually put Priory of the Orange Tree on my 5-star predictions, but this is a book that multiple times I've picked it up, and it's not even because the length is longer and that's why I haven't been able to get through it, or that I haven't enjoyed it, or I've found it too slow at the beginning. Rather, I've just always had something come up where it's interrupted my reading of it, and then by the time that I have the time to get back to it, I have that feeling I described a moment ago where I think I just need to restart it at this point. And Priory of the Orange Tree, this has happened because the very first time I picked it up, it was around when I was traveling, and I don't really feel like I can be as engaged when I'm traveling. You know, you're trying to listen for when your plane is being announced, when boarding's going to happen, stuff like that, and you just get kind of distracted. So I'm not very good at reading while traveling, which I would also love to know if you are. Anytime people talk about when they're on vacation, oh, I'm going to have so much time to read, I'm the opposite. I know that whatever I pick up on vacation, unless it's something that's really easy to get into, I'm not going to be able to focus on it. But anywho, Priory of the Orange Tree, the first time I picked it up, I was traveling, so I found that I was not getting as into it as I wanted. Other times, I think buddy reads were happening and I had to prioritize the buddy reads, or library holds were coming in and there were books that I really wanted to get around to, so the library essentially interrupted my reading of it. But I am planning to pick that one up this year, restart it from the beginning, and actually read through all of it. Then hopefully I can read the prequel story as well as the new one that's come out that is much shorter, and I've tried to avoid seeing too many thoughts about the other ones, but I am excited to finally actually be able to finish that one. Now for one that I have literally started this year that I haven't yet completed. It's kind of one that maybe seems a little out of left field, seeing as I primarily read fantasy, but that would be The Silence of Bones. I've read 2 other books by this author, Red Palace and A Crane Among Wolves. I enjoyed both of those. This year, when I have deviated from fantasy, a few of the times I have been for historical fiction stories, and very specifically historical fiction that also tend to have some form of mystery or murder mystery within them. And this author, that is basically their niche. Specifically, they are looking at historical fiction murder mysteries set in Korea. And there's a lot to the culture that makes the murder mystery very different from a lot of the other ones that I've picked up. I'm not by any means extremely familiar with thrillers or murder mystery type of stories. If you have any recommendations, feel free to leave them. I just recently read a ton of French one and I would love to pick up more. But regardless, I really love the way that you actually get to learn a little bit about the culture, or at the very least, it prompts you to then want to look up things that you see within the story. So for example, how they examine the bodies, who examines the bodies based off of the gender of the victim and also the gender of the person doing the examination, those sorts of things. There's a lot of rules around that. And all of it is quite fascinating, but then you also kind of get roped into being engaged with what happened to this person, what was the reason behind this murder. So naturally, of course, The Silence of Bones has a similar blueprint for the story, although each of the books has their own very distinct characters and different plot lines, but they all have that sort of as the base. And I've just found that similar to what I described about Priory of the Orange Tree, where I felt like, okay, I'm not as within this story as I should be, I should probably just restart it. That same thing essentially happened with Silence of Bones. So I think I just need to go back, restart, and then plan on actually reading a little bit more at a time. This also, unfortunately, fell victim to my shift from reading large chunks at a time to reading a little bit each day. I did a whole video about how I now read every single day, which actually is different from what I used to do. But I now read every single day, and this book was one of the first ones that I started to do that with, and I just think I wasn't reading enough, and it suffered from my shift in reading habits. But I do plan to continue on with this one, hopefully before the end of the year. It's not like it's complex and that it's really hard to get into or anything. So I should be able to get around to it and complete it before the end of the year. The next question is, do you have a specific story or series that is an autumnal transition book for you, meaning a book that you like to pick up every single year that leads you into the fall season? And the answer directly is no. There's nothing that I come back to every single year necessarily, but I am somebody who likes to try and save certain books for this time of year that I have on my TBR, ones that feel a little bit scarier, a little bit creepier, a little bit witchier. And so one that I had saved for this year that I finally wanted to get around to, and I did, was The Near Witch by V.E. Schwab. I did a whole wrap-up video where I talked about that one a little bit more. It was probably my least favorite thing by V.E. Schwab, but it's understandable because it was apparently the first story that V.E. Schwab actually had go from in her head to pen and paper, we'll say. And it came later in her publishing career as kind of this was the origin of my writing. So it makes sense that it's not necessarily as strong, but that doesn't negate the fact that I also thought it wasn't as strong, and my personal feelings for it were that it was fine. But it was a nice one to read going into the fall. I've also been trying to pick up, I mentioned Ton of French a little bit ago, I've been trying to pick up stories that maybe are a little bit outside fantasy or are dark academia, and some dark academia is separate from fantasy, and then of course sometimes fantasy has that as a subgenre. So I've had some things on my TBR, things I'm either planning to pick up or I have picked up recently that I haven't had a chance to talk about yet. So for example, finally tried A Discovery of Witches, and I definitely have thoughts about A Discovery of Witches, but we'll save that for another video. Question 3, the one that I can probably, I think, fairly accurately predict the answer for a lot of you. Is there a new release you're still waiting for? I'm imagining a lot of you are still waiting for The Strength of the Few. Many of you know, have been doing this video series where I go through the Goodreads Choice Award nominees that I've picked up over the last 5 years, and we're doing a tier ranking. And I've had polls with some of the more popular books asking from each given year which one of these books is your favorite. And then I've pitted them all against each other, the winners of each of the years against each other. And The Will of the Many has been the one that pretty overwhelmingly has gotten votes from everyone. And given that The Strength of the Few is a sequel to that, pretty sure that's the one a lot of people are waiting for. I would imagine some people are also waiting for the new J. Kristoff book. I never know there's Empire the Vampire, and Empire of the Damned, and whatever the other titles are. I haven't read them, so I'm bad at remembering the names of them, but I imagine there's some of you that's actually what you're waiting for. If you are waiting for something different than those two, I would love to know what it is. Been looking forward, though, to The Summer War by Naomi Novik. I had this on anticipated releases. Naomi Novik bounces around between different genres, and I've enjoyed some of Naomi Novik's works. I don't care for Uprooted, but I really like Spinning Silver. I like Temeraire. So I wanted to pick this one up and see where it landed. And the synopsis made it sound like it was going to be falling under a similar umbrella of storytelling to Spinning Silver, kind of more fairy tale-esque. And when I saw the actual physical copy, it's much smaller than I was expecting. But I'm also curious because authors like T. Kingfisher have shown that sometimes these shorter works actually are really fitting for more fairy tale-esque stories, and the writing style can be more within the I'm telling you a story, and you kind of feel wrapped up in what feels like a classic fantasy tale. So I'm really actually looking forward to that one. I think it's going to be great for the season as well. Next up, we have what are 3 books that you want to read by the end of the year. There are so many books that I'd like to read before the end of the year. It's kind of hard to narrow it down. But I have a couple of patron books that were patron picks that I plan to do probably dedicated blogs for, or maybe do discussion videos for. We'll see. But one of them would be Lady Trent. Another one would be Jonathan Strange and Mr. I always want to say Norrell, but I've also heard some people say it's Norrell. But Jonathan Strange, I definitely need to pick that one up. And a lot of the books that are in my 5-star predictions, for example, the rest of the Gale Song series, and then the new one that's come out within that, as well as a number of others. I mentioned Priory of the Orange Tree earlier. I really want to reread Blood Song. So there are a number of books that I want to read before the end of the year. I don't, I didn't just pick 3 just now, and it's hard to just narrow it down to 3 because there are so many, but those ones are definitely very high priority for me. Next up, we have, is there a book that you think could shock you and be your favorite? I don't know, because anything I think has the chance of becoming a favorite, I already suspect that, so it wouldn't really be a shock. So for example, I have loved Children of Gods and Fighting Men, so I expect that I'm gonna like the next 2 books, hence why they were on my 5-star predictions. So I don't know that anything's gonna surprise me, because I think everything would fall into that. And I'm trying to think of books that are on my TBR or books that are scheduled to be released at the end of the year. I don't think there's anything that I'm planning to pick up that I don't think is gonna be good. I guess this question's always tough for me because I tend to pick up books that I expect I'm gonna, at the very least, somewhat enjoy. I will still, of course, if a book doesn't sound like my typical cup of tea, I'll still give it a try. I'm trying to think if there are any, though, that are on my TBR that fit within that, and I don't think so. So, no. I'm gonna say no, there are no books that I think are gonna shock me and be new favorites by the end of the year. And then last, have you already started making reading plans for 2025? I suppose in a sense, yes and no. I haven't made any extremely specific reading plans, but I do want to continue reading every single day. I have continued to read every single day ever since I made that video, so we're pretty strong in with that. And I also plan to probably pick up some more light novels. This year has been my first time diving into light novels, and it started with a bang because many of you know I've become obsessed with Apothecary Diaries, but I do plan to start another light novel series, Heaven Official's Blessing. I've not heard too many specifics. I've just heard people absolutely love that series. So I'll probably read that with some of my friends. And we've been buddy reading Apothecary Diaries, so if you're interested in joining that buddy read, I'll have my side channel linked because that's where live shows are and whatnot for that. I think for the most part, whatever I don't end up getting around to here at the end of this year, I will probably try to prioritize early next year. That's it though for the end of the year book tag. Feel free, of course, to answer any one of these questions or all of them if you feel like it, or some here and there. Besides just though the questions themselves, I just kind of want to know what your reading has been like this year. What are your reading plans moving forward until the end of the year? And I want to, even though I just said in response to the last prompt about do you have any reading plans, I don't have any specific ones like I was talking about, but I do want to try as much as possible to read more of the kinds of books that all of you are fans of, especially if they're ones that you feel like don't get talked about enough, because I just think it's a fun way to not only hype up something that maybe is a little bit of a hidden gem, but also just feels like it's a nice way to connect with all of you through reading some of your favorites. So if you want to mention some of your favorite books of this year or just favorites in general, feel free to do so. Thanks so much for watching though. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you later. Bye.